Welcome to this edition of Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse political candidates or parties. The League does, however, take positions on issues. Our purpose is to empower voters and defend democracy. Go Vote Omaha primarily focuses on policy issues, and as a result of our discussions, we hope that you will feel ready to make an informed decision at election time. I'm Candide Santiago, Director of Operations for the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, and your host for today's program. Today we are talking to our friend from Vote 411 to talk about the League of Women Voters Guide and how to prepare yourself for election season. Joining us today is Jeanne Miller, Director of Vote 411. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Candide. You know, I am just absolutely fascinated by the workings behind a voter's guide and all of the elements behind it. What's very interesting is I am the only one in my family that did not serve in the military.
Really?
And so when my younger son made Eagle Scout, I said, well, I think I need to give back to the community. And I volunteered as an election worker, and I've been doing that for 28 years now. And there was an opportunity to work with the Voter's Guide when I joined the League of Women Voters, and I said, me.
Sign me up.
Sign me up.
We thank you for doing that. So to begin our conversation, I'd love to ask you, what is the Voter's Guide exactly?
Well, when you hear the word Voter's Guide, there are a lot of different things. There are checklists where people say, I come from this particular viewpoint, and do you agree with this, and this statement? Or a more general sense where they say, tell us a little bit about yourself. What I like about the League of Women Voters Guide, I've been voting using something like this for most of my voting life. That's
incredible.
A long time. But the voter's guide that I'm talking about and that I work with this is the 2022 version.
Yes,
and it's paper, and you look in there, and there's a list of races, there's a list of candidates, and there are questions, and you look to see how did they answer the questions.
Definitely.
That's pretty much what it is in a nutshell.
Thank you for that great explanation. What would you say the process of putting together the voter's guide is like? Is there any question-making process, or how does contacting candidates go?
It's very much a collaborative process. I am not the only person behind one of these. There are so many volunteers that make this work, so many wonderful candidates that respond to us. The first thing that we have to do is figure out who's going to be on the ballot. Well, before that, we actually have to say what races are going to be on the ballot. And based on the races on the ballot, we get together a team of people and we say, what are appropriate questions? Here are questions we've asked for the last 10 years. What works, what doesn't work? One of the things we have to do with the questions is make sure that they are nonpartisan and not immediately topical, because a question I ask and that I formulated, I should say, back in February might not be applicable by the time the election rolls around in May and again in November.
Right.
Once we have the questions in place, we start learning who the candidates are. We send out postcards to the candidates inviting them to participate. Then the really hard part starts. We, as a team, find out email addresses so we can invite these candidates to contribute their biographical information and answers to the questions on Vote 411.
Yes.
From there, I can copy and paste and create the printed guide, but that way we also have an online component for people who like to do things online.
Yes, and we love vote411.org so much. With having such a great platform, could you talk to us a little bit about the candidate response rate?
That is really interesting because we have a number of candidates that get right to it. And that response rate is something like 12%, which is an awful lot of paper to say nothing. So our volunteer team then reaches out, emails and texts and Facebook messages, and actually picking up the phone and calling the candidates. Right now, well, I should say, before I arrived at the studio, the response rate was 40%. I had another 5 responses pop into my inbox right as I was waiting from the drive to here.
Incredible.
Those phone calls are really making a difference, and the candidates are saying, I've heard of you, you do great work, I want to participate.
That's amazing. I'm so happy that the rate is increasing as we know the deadline is approaching. So
Yes.
we hope that the candidates can submit in time to make it into our voter's guide, right? So are there differences by party, office, or geographical location?
Well, what I took a look at that. Most of the races we're getting responses on are down ballot races. Now, when people go to a primary, they're thinking presidential or perhaps federal candidates, House of Representatives, Senate. And the people that make the biggest differences in our everyday lives are down the ballot.
Right.
And those are your county commissioners, your state board of education, your legislative candidates, MUD, OPPD, school boards, city
Judges.
councils, mayors for the smaller towns here in Douglas County. Those people are the ones that are responding, the down ballot candidates. And it's not broken out by Republican or Democrat, nonpartisan, libertarian, legal marijuana now. It's a pretty good mix.
Okay.
If there's a candidate for a down ballot race, they want to get their message out.
Okay.
I'm finding, though, that the farther away you get from Omaha, the lower the response rate is. And I think that's just because they don't understand how wide our reach is.
Right. Okay, that's definitely great to know. Are there any ways that the voter's guide is accessible to the public, or could you please explain how it is accessible to the public?
Oh, yes. Well, we have paper guides, and those are going to go out to the Election Commission, to the libraries, to our office, of course, so that if people are looking for it, we can get those out. Volunteers will take them with them when they're doing voter registration campaigns. Now, if you can't get your hands on a paper ballot, we have vote411.org. And when you go into that platform, it asks your address. And it will pop up a ballot that'll be just like the one you get in the voting booth.
Awesome.
So they'll take a look at that. Now, if a voter wants to see everything that's in here but can't get their hands on a paper copy, we're going to have a PDF available on the website.
Awesome. And would you say there are other ways that voters can get involved about learning about the different candidates or issues that they were going to be voting about?
Yes. But I have to say that democracy is work. If you want to know who you're voting for, you might have to do a little bit of research. For example, if a candidate gives an answer to a question and you're saying, okay, that's nice, but that's not the question I wanted answered. Often the candidates will give you a Facebook page or a website or even a Twitter account, and you can do research there. Mm-hmm. The newspapers are good sources if you've got those available to you. Sometimes radio, not so much, because a lot of the radio programs have a definite bias to them one way or another. But if you want to know about a candidate, you're going to have to do a little bit of work to figure out who it is that represents you, the voter.
Definitely, and it helps you to be more confident once you make that decision.
Definitely.
Too. I would love to ask you, I know that you've given us such great responses, but how would you say that voters can prepare for voting in person or by mail?
This year, it's going to be very, very different. As I said, I've been working the polls for 28 years. First thing that voters need to know is, where are they going to go? We get a number of people that have their little card from 4 years ago that says, I was supposed to go to this school, and this is where I have always voted.
Right.
After the pandemic, a lot of those polling places changed. We aren't able to get into this place, this place, this place. So the first thing is, know where you're going.
Right.
Because if you go to the wrong place, you can't vote there, or if you fill out a provisional ballot and you don't do it correctly, it doesn't count. Know where you're going. Second, we have voter ID now. And voter ID, that's not going to be a problem for, the Secretary of State says, 95% of our voters. But If you're a person that walks to the voting place and you left your purse at home or your wallet at home and you get to the polling place and it's back home, you either have to go back home and go get it, or you have to fill out materials and then you have to validate those materials at the election office within a week.
Wow.
That is the biggest thing. There are so many ways and so many organizations. I know that the League has a great resource.
Yes.
What happens if you can't get a birth certificate,
Right.
or you're getting difficult, you can't navigate that process? Those organizations will help you to get the ID that will allow you to vote.
Yes.
And the really great thing is, I've got this great student ID picture from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. It doesn't have an address on there, it doesn't have an expiration date. I can show that, and that counts.
Yeah.
An expired driver's license counts. The poll workers aren't going to look at your address because so many people hang on to their driver's licenses after they move and don't update them.
Right.
We want to make sure when we're acting as a poll worker that your vote counts.
Absolutely. Thank you for your response to that answer. Is voting on a nonpartisan ballot different from voting on a partisan ballot?
Oh, yes.
Please tell me. the
I have to tell you, just a brief anecdote. 2 years ago for the gubernatorial primary, we had a nonpartisan voter come in and wanted a ballot that had the governor's races for the Republicans. And I said, and she was very, very unhappy about that. So in Nebraska, we have 4 parties. And if you are registered for any one of those 4 parties, you get the ballot associated with those parties.
Right.
As a nonpartisan voter, I can go in and say, hi, I would like the nonpartisan Republican ballot, or the nonpartisan Democrat, the nonpartisan Libertarian, or the nonpartisan Legal Marijuana Now ballot. And you look at it, and what this person did is said, governor's not on there. The Republicans have a closed primary. That means any race where you put RD, you put R behind the name,
Right.
you can't vote for them, except House of Representatives and Senate. So a nonpartisan who asks for a nonpartisan Republican ballot will receive a ballot with just House of Representatives, U.S. Senate 2-year term, U.S. Senate 4-year term. Every voter, nonpartisan and partisan alike, receives a nonpartisan sheet of offices. And those would be State Board of Education, Legislature, Public Service, not Public Service Commissioner, school boards, City Council, all the down ballot races I was talking about a little bit earlier. And if you live in the city of Omaha, I don't know if this will be a separate piece of paper, but there will be 6 special City of Omaha charter amendment issues to be voted on.
Okay.
So nonpartisan voter has a lot of choices, but they just can't vote for president or public service commissioner.
Okay. Well, thank you for providing that great explanation. Are there any other thoughts or information you'd like to tell us about before they get out to vote?
Yes. Remember I said something about do some research?
Yes.
I have already received 2 negative campaign ads.
Okay.
And I'm going, boy, they're getting out there ahead of it. If you see a negative campaign ad on TV or receive one in the mail, throw it away, recycle it, turn it off, ignore it. I operate under Nebraska NICE principles. When I ask a candidate for their responses, I want them to tell them about themselves and their positions and not what's wrong with everybody else. I already know that. I want to know what they're going to be able to do. So those negative ads, get rid of them. Don't pay any attention to them. Find out what the candidate will do for you, not what they don't like about the other person.
That's great advice, and it keeps things very neutral to understand who's going to do the best for our community. So I
Yes.
appreciate that, the outlook that you have. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us, Jeanne. We really appreciate you joining the program. For the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm Candide Santiago.